Live, mate. Says I'm going to sit the camera down.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're going.
Do I need to put these on?
You can if you want. You don't have
Yeah,
to.
that's
I'll just
Yeah.
hold it away.
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for giving me your time.
No,
I know as
pleasure.
an
Thanks for
MP
having
you are
us.
extremely busy.
Yeah.
Secondly, I'll be honest with you.
Mm.
I was when I approached your office.
Yeah.
I was thinking because I obviously you're quite prominent at the moment. I think you are quite prominent. Certainly one of the more prominent ex-military members of parliament at the moment. I thought, oh, be interesting to get on. And I thought, oh God, he'll never come on. He never. So I googled the office, got the office, and they said, oh, email the lady who manages the diary.
Yeah.
And I was expecting back to have to submit a list of questions, what I couldn't talk about, And, and refreshingly, I've had none of that, which I really appreciate. Honestly, I really appreciate.
I mean, look, the way these things work is you get obviously a lot of traffic coming in the office, and you get a lot of requests.
Yeah.
But generally, anything to do. Look, I went into this rather mad world because I'm fed up with the way this country's relationship with its military is at the moment. And so when opportunities come up to engage with the veterans community, I'll take them. I go in and speak at all manner of events or go to events that, that often there is absolutely no tie between me and them other than I have served. But I think it's right that people who have served or veterans have that political representation that I think we haven't had for a long time.
True. There was an article came out 2 days ago, which came across my new feed, and it was saying it was something along the lines of 10 members of parliament you didn't know were ex-military or something. It was like a clickbaity title, but it wasn't clickbait. I tell you what it was. It was in the Guardian. It was in the Guardian. Right. And you were on there with a bunch of others.
Right.
And one of the comments it was saying, one of the observations that the article made was that is that it was speculating that it's better, it's more beneficial for the country and for the government to have more ex-military in positions of senior positions, important positions, because it's a very small fraction of society has experienced things like you have in conflicts you have. So having that experience injected into the government gives you a better perspective on critical decisions like should we help out in the country, should we assist an ally in this operation, that and the impacts of it and what real benefit we have on the ground in whatever.
Well, I mean there's two points here. One is that I don't think sort of military service is it should be any sort of prerequisite for this sort of thing. So we've had great leaders who've had nothing to do with the military, but similarly, our greatest leaders like Churchill absolutely have, and it certainly gives you an insight, and it gives you the key thing really is a perspective on what's going on, because particularly the political world. If you think about the political world at the moment, I mean, everything is commented on. Everything you do is reported on. It's like a sort of fish tank world, if you like. And the trouble is with that sort of environment, people can lose focus and perspective on what is going on pretty quickly, actually, and make some pretty strange decisions. And you've seen that happen. There's a things like in Westminster, things like the expense scandal, for example, or the sexual harassment scandal we saw last year. I mean, these are symptoms of a culture, in my view, that's become very disconnected with the people that we serve. I think there were always multifaceted sides to this. Some of the sexual harassment stuff was clearly nonsense, but there was too much of it for people not to accept that there was a problem there. And I just think that if you live in this bubble world, you can end up making decisions that are not in the best interests of A, what you originally became a member of parliament for, but B, the country. And I think it can be, definitely quite dangerous.
You mean that the misdemeanors that you talk about the expensive scandal and the sexual harassment by misdemeanor. I'm not playing it down how serious those things
Yeah.
are. They're symptoms that those people or the organisation involved become disconnected with society.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, if you, I mean, it's possible. Westminster is an amazing compound. I mean, it's possible to go in there, get off the train, get on the tube stops in Westminster. You can get up, go into the office, you can use the gym, you can eat there. You could never leave Westminster if you're in a safe seat. And the whole thing about our democracy is that it's about accountability. And if you make yourself kind of not accountable, and you don't stay in touch with the people who elected you there, and you become, you get treated very well as a member of parliament. I think if you buy into that and take it too seriously, I think it will cause problems. Like you said at the beginning of this, the idea that you would go and do a sit-down chat and then vet all the questions and all this rubbish. I mean, it's so sort of manufactured. I think, frankly, people have kind of had enough of that side of politics, and I certainly have, and that's why I joined up in the first place.
Yeah, not just politics. The way that information is given to you through the media, condensed down to facts or figures, often misconstrued or manipulated to get the viewings, to get the ratings, to get the hits. It's interesting what you're saying about that disconnection from society, those those scandals maybe a symptom of. The Michael, who you just met, we talk about all sorts, but one of the things that we were talking about, we ended up going on vaguely discussing government, but just by chance. But by chance,
everyone switch off.
I know, yeah, I know. But I, with my old man, a few months back, we sort of started on this thought experiment almost, and it was discussing hypothetically that if we were going to colonize another planet, one of the questions that came up between us when we were discussing it is, well, if we're going to send 50 people, the first 50 to go and establish the colony, would it be best to have 50 people chosen from the top 1% of the academics and intellectuals in the world of society, the most capable people, capable thinkers, or would it be better for those 50 people to be taken from a cross section of society? And that, when you were saying about that disconnect from the people who run the country and society, is that what's causing that disconnect? Is it because of the classes they're part of, middle and upper class?
I don't think it's so much a class issue. I think that actually, this country's moved away from class structures, I think, pretty quickly over the last 10-15 years. I think clearly they exist, and I wouldn't deny that. But I think it's less important. I think social mobility, you now have more people going to university, for example, from deprived backgrounds that we've ever had before. I think in that respect, we are getting better. But I don't really subscribe to the fact that, these sort of experts who, clearly know an awful lot about certain things. You'll have seen it before. You'll have seen extremely intelligent officers in the military who make ridiculous decisions when it comes to common sense. And that exists, I'm afraid, in society as well. So, I'd certainly go for a cost cut of society and simply, you look at someone's sort of social standing, and a lot of the time that has nothing to do with who they are as an individual. A bit of bad luck, a few bad decisions, and that could actually be any one of us. It could be me. I'm very, very lucky to be in the position I am now. I've been through a war a few times, wrote a book about it, become a member of parliament. All these things are, yes, I've done my bit, but they're predicated on a significant slice of good luck. And you must never, I never forget that, which is why I'm keen to sort of help everyone else out as much as I can, because you never know when it's going to end.
Well, in fact, I'll step back from that. 2-9 Commando. Were you with Royal Artillery the entire time you were in?
That was my parent unit.
I think we were on the same one of the same Afghan tours.
Really? So who were you with?
I was a 3-power. So
right. When were you in 3-power?
A grin in your face.
Can't have everything, can you? Marines turn you down, did they?
No, they turned down everything. I was going to go down a line there. I'm not going to go down.
No.
Afghan. What? Herc 4, Herc 8, Herc 13. So 2006, 2008.
Good. So I did 2006 as well on the MLTs.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So took over from you guys.
Where were you? Where were you with the omelette?
Well, I did.
Oh, in fact, OMLT for civilians who listen to this is Operational Mental Liaison Team.
Correct.
So
So that was a small part. Yeah, that was a small part of Tasos Helmand, which basically the start of the Afghan army and trying to get these guys in, recruit them, train them, take them on operations. We were just essentially training in that time around Bastion, and didn't really get up to much, to be honest. I mean, the ground holding companies in those days were sort of definitely doing all the legwork, and I wasn't involved in that. I did 2008 and 9 with a group called Task Force 42. I then did 2010. I did another ground holding operation, and I supported 1 Lancs, 2 Lancs, and then 3 Para came in actually at the end of that tour, and we handed over to them.
What year was that?
2010, end of 2010.
Yeah.
They did a winter tour 2010, 2011.
I didn't envy the OMLT. I remember that.
No, the MLT was a bit of a joke, really, because
no, not from that regard. From the difficulty of the task. I mean,
well, this is what I mean. I mean, I had myself, a Royal Marines sergeant, 3 Royal Marines corporals, and 92 Afghans, and an interpreter who I'm not entirely sure was an interpreter. And it was chaos, absolute chaos. You go out in the morning, they'd be fighting. Actually getting them to line up in 3 ranks and sit cross-legged in front of you was a significant undertaking. And if you could achieve that, you were really onto something. So if you then imagine pushing on from that to teaching them how to search a vehicle, teaching them what to do when you come under contact, or small team drills and all this other stuff. I mean, it was a monumental undertaking. I think we've had much more success recently. I do think there was a serious element of tokenism in those early days around training the Afghans. Largely, I think, because as you'll have experienced, I mean, I don't think anybody, the politicians had one view of going into Afghan in 2006. I think the military had a slightly more enlightened view that it wasn't going to be easy, but I think the nature of the conflict ultimately caught us all out, and that meant that it was extremely kinetic. The focus was on kind of staying alive rather than trying to do a counterinsurgency mission, and we got off to the wrong foot. But
do you know how long that operation was, or the campaign was planned for? Do you know what their ballpark?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't know how long it was planned for. There were silly comments flying around about doing Helmand without firing shots and things. I think the issue around longevity of conflict is, and the reason why, our generation, I genuinely think that we have, as a generation of soldiers and warriors, we kind of been privileged in a way, and clearly that's not the case for a lot of people as well. But I feel like we learned a lot. We developed seriously quickly. You think how much the military developed between 2005 and 2013, even in terms of how long we could keep blokes alive for, our protected mobility that saved lives. I mean, most of us have been hit by an IED or two, and and in the early days they were pretty much non-survivable. And now, people like me are sat here totally unaffected by it. So, we have been through a period of massive change, but that has come at a serious cost. There are blokes who have died who should not have died. There have been mistakes made, and ultimately the government has not had the stomach for the fight. So if you look at British foreign policy, it's been almost entirely dictated by the British electoral system, right? So Gordon Brown could stand there in 2010 and say, I brought troops home from Iraq. Was it the right time to leave Iraq? Of course it wasn't. You saw what ISIS did, and completely flattened the Iraqi army, really pissed off the Americans. And then we went to Helmand, and then we withdrew so that David Cameron can stand up in 2015 and say, look, I brought all the troops home from Helmand, and we're now reinserting back into that conflict. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do to have a timeline in your mind, but it doesn't take the brains of an archbishop to work out if you say to the Taliban year after next we're going home, they're going to be like, fine, no sweat, we'll just wait it out. And then the whole thing becomes like, you're like, you know, why? I mean, it seems at the time, it seems kind of, elements of it seem quite pointless anyway. I don't know what it was like for you, but we would do operations, seize the ground, nail it down, do a bit of work, have a shower, then leave, and then do exactly the same thing to the same piece of ground 2 or 3 days later. And you know, and that element of pointlessness around it is very difficult for certainly junior leaders, commanders, soldiers, and so on.
Yeah, it's a difficult type of warfare to understand. It was essentially it was well, the different various stages of the 3 different tours. It was, you know, guerrilla warfare in no uncertain terms. But and to from the examples you're saying there, in, hold ground, give it back up, out, back in, back out, and that happened from on a small scale, from patrol to patrol, up to a massive scale. Musakala being a case in point, you know, one example where we obviously the infamous is in 06 where they came out, and then 6 months later, a battle went a massive, like it was almost the whole point of a whole
ceasefire,
operation,
right? Yeah, withdraw, everything would be all right.
Yeah,
that worked well, didn't it? And then, you know, same happened in Sangin in 2010. You know, supposed ceasefire, and it just I think people underestimate what it took for junior commanders, as in junior soldiers, lance jacks, full screws, and junior officers, to repeatedly sort of motivate and lead operations in what remained an extremely dangerous environment, but without that sort of core vision of a mission. It was tough, and I certainly found that in the first, you know, certainly in 2006. I mean, it seemed like one of those mad colonial, you know, escapades, which actually, once, you know, blokes start getting shot, you think, you know, what are we doing?
It was a bit Wild West. When did you join up?
So I joined in 2001.
You're, in fact, you're the same age as me. You're 3 months older than me. So
am I?
2001.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I joined up. So you joined just a year after me then.
Yeah.
Where did you go to? So you didn't go to uni, no?
No. So I grew up in a large family, 7 brothers and sisters, and generally a naval family. My father, when we reached the age of 16, generally liked us to sign up to the military. My 3 older brothers went into the Navy.
Just like part of family life.
Like part of family life. I wanted to go into the army. But I was quite fortunate because I had developed this talent for music. And I was actually quite a good singer, choir boy in my youth. And so I managed to get a scholarship to Eastbourne College, which is a public school. And so I stayed there till I was 18. But university was not on the cards. It was get a job. And I did work for a little while in London in finance, which was frightfully boring.
Why is that so common amongst ex-officers? It seems to me it's so common.
Because it's easy.
Really?
Yeah.
You just seem to walk out straight. I always think, well, so many of you, as in commission, no, it wasn't commission, so many of you guys able to go straight to those jobs.
It's easy.
So it's easy.
For old rope. You know, the sort of things to get valued in the city are the sort of blustering, you know, sort of overconfident, you know, smile come what may.
Is it like a general, the same sort of area of money or finance that they're going to? Is it like, I don't know, or is it like just a broad range of things that go to wherever their mates are?
Largely, I think it's where the mates are.
Right.
I don't think there's anything that you can learn on a joint fires course that will teach you how to sort derivatives. But I think generally it's a great thing for a lot of people to do and make a lot of money.
I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking it.
No, they can you know, build their families and so on. But it's certainly not my cup of tea. So I did some exams and so on, but I just, you know, I was waiting to get in the military, and as soon as I could, went to Sandhurst. I went to Sandhurst at 19. The average age is 26. So, you know, and people with a degree, 26? And people like me in those days got paid less as well. So non-grads have always been paid about 2/3 of what graduates are paid.
Wait, hang on, are you talking about in the military?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you're a non-graduate officer, your promotion is slower, and you get paid less. Because they're trying to entice graduates.
But hang on, why is your promotion not performance based?
No, of course it's not. It's all time based.
What do you mean? Of course it's not.
Well, it's,
I know.
Army we're talking about,
I know.
You can't get promoted on merit. I think what a terrible idea that is.
I know second lieutenant, and
second
captain
lieutenant, captain, and then major sort of. And then, to be fair, merit obviously comes into it a lot more, I think, when people start taking these jobs seriously. But I mean, I think like a lot of people, I can't remember anybody not being promoted from second lieutenant to lieutenant. And
no, you'd have to be pretty.
I remember one guy who left the army as a lieutenant, didn't make captain, which was quite an achievement. But I'm afraid to sort of burst that bubble. There isn't some sort of cutthroat selection testing requiring you to go from second lieutenant to lieutenant. It is literally time served.
I mean, it's like for us.
Well, aside from you, at least you did a leadership course. Well, I don't know what you do in the parachute.
No, but I mean, it's the same as the second lieutenant. The same as like a private being a grade 3, whatever it's in depot, and then the grade 2 and the grade 1. That's just you just get it,
right? But you don't just get promoted to lance jack or full screw.
No, that's different.
You have to do leadership course.
But it's in a different way, though, is it not? Do you not? Does it not get indicated whether you're going to be like colonel or
no?
Is it?
No, because you get your reports, right? Don't you? Do you remember you used to get your annual report?
Maybe look despairing at me, mate.
The annual report.
In my head, all captains are awesome. Obviously, that's not the case.
No. You get your annual report where you sit down with the boss and they read out. I mean, 8 out of 10 of them say the same thing. This guy's got great potential. He's got potential to be a major, a colonel, and it's. I mean, the career management in the military, I've got to be honest, is pretty woeful.
Yeah.
And whilst I'm sure they're better than they were, they're sort of 7 years ago. When did I leave? Only 4 years ago I left. I mean, they were terrible. I always had this picture of sort of MCM Div, that place in Glasgow where you go, where officers' jobs are handed out. You go up there and sit down with some guy and he talks about your career. In reality, I think it was basically a big tombola. And you walk in and they spin it as you walk in, and then the job falls out the bottom, and they will then say to you that you've been selected for that job. So I mean, I had some amazingly funny. I remember one trip to MCM with this guy, this officer who was slightly junior to me, and we'd been on tour, I think, and so we'd missed the regimental visit of MCM to the regiment, and we went up to see MCM and we had to drive a car, so we were in a hire car. I can't remember where it was from. It's from somewhere in the south all the way to Glasgow. So we went up there, stayed the night, long time in the car, and the whole time we were bantering about like what MCM were going to say to us, what horrific job you're going to get given, go and change the coffee, at some training regiment and so on. And there was this one job, I can't remember what it was, and I would never repeat it anyway, but this guy, my friend, his name was Will, was saying, he just kept joking about getting this job and how he knew it was going to happen and blah, blah, blah. And, we both go in and you think, it won't happen to me. And I was all right. I can't remember what I got. But I remember he went in before me, came out of his interview. I was like, all right, mate, how did that go? And he was just white and speechless, absolutely speechless. So I was like, shit, I wonder what happened there. So anyway, went for my interview, came back, got in the car. He didn't speak to me until we left Scotland. So Glasgow's like not on the border; it's like halfway up, right? Yeah. He was so shocked. He was so angry. I remember our commander phoned us, commanding officer, and he wouldn't speak to him on the phone. It was on like speakerphone, and he wouldn't speak to him. It was one of the funniest episodes, entirely at this poor chap's expense. But that is career management within the military.
I got a mate who's having dramas at the minute. He's still in. He's injured. It's not sort of conventional injury, should we say? And he's just been shot on by his command structure. It's not good at all, really. But he'll sort it out. I'm sure he will. He's got a handle on it. But you're digressing there. When you got out in 2014?
Yeah.
Did you decide straight away to get into politics?
No, not at all. I mean, it was a growing experience, really. And a lot of it came from my first sort of interaction with politicians, a lot of it from operational experience. So, particularly in times when I was working at Tier 42 and things like that, I remember politicians would come out and get briefed on sort of operations and so on. And I just remember looking at them thinking, we could basically say whatever we wanted. Like, we're all running off the back of the lift in chicken suits, and they'd just nod and go, yeah.
The politicians,
yeah. And I thought, it's a crazy system, this, but actually they've got the power, right? They can say yes or no or whatever. And actually, if there's something you really care about, if there's something you really want to change, if there's something you really believe in and you want to change it, you're going to have to get elected. And I just sort of parked that for a bit because I was thoroughly enjoying my military career. I was a joint fires operator, so it was a good job, and I was away quite a bit. But then as I went back out in 2010, did another tour, and it's pretty rough in 2010. Quite a lot of guys were injured, and my ACK was killed and things like that. And I saw the way his family was looked after, which on the whole was positive. But you come into families where the experience isn't so positive. And I just and then the veterans thing really began to bite me, as in how we look after our veterans in this country and the disconnect. I remember coming back in 2010 and I couldn't go to Remembrance Day because I felt so bitter about the way the country treated veterans, or even saw veterans, particularly politicians. I couldn't watch them at the cenotaph behaving the way they did. And then, with this sort of veneer of respect and so on. And then the reality of it, which was being felt by veterans up and down the country. And I thought, and then in 2012, more of the blokes killed themselves and were killed in conflict. I remember particularly the story of the chap down in Sennybridge who I spoke about during my maiden speech, who took his life on the training area down there. And we've all been down Sennybridge and we know what it's like. And you can just imagine what that's like. And he took a video of himself and sent it to his mum just before he died. And
saying what?
Just basically saying, I'm so sorry, I just can't get my shit. I can't.
Who was this?
So he was a guy in the Royal Welsh.
I don't remember this.
His name escapes me momentarily. Just bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
It was Danny something.
Yeah, Sennybridge is grim. Sennybridge was grim, especially if, like a Tom Rollins track, you're just getting thrashed all day. So he must have done a tour beforehand and then.
Well, he was in the Royal Welsh. He'd been on a few, and he tried to get help, but he came back and found it was, just the experience I think that a lot of people have, a very patchwork of care. You're going from one care provider to another. You're retelling your story, and what it makes you feel like ultimately is that no one gives a shit, and that kind of piles on top of the difficulty of dealing with post-traumatic stress as it is. And if you think about what takes a military guy, what lads like, it takes that person to get to a place where they want to end their life. That is a horrific journey. And for the country not to sit up and take that seriously, as I felt they didn't when we reached that watermark in 2012.
I don't think it's improved.
I don't think it has improved, but that's what prompted me to think, how do can I go and join Help for Heroes? Can I go and work for the local authority, go in the probation service? And then I remember back to when I was in Afghan and briefing politicians, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to try and be an MP. And I'd never voted before. I had no experience, no interest in politics. But for me, it's this vehicle. It is ultimately, people have only heard of me. I've only got this platform. You're very kind, but those accolades or whatever, it's only because I've been elected, right? So in a way, it's only because you've been elected. Well, people know who I am. People know the agenda. People. Things that I've managed to do around closing the Iraq Historical Allegations team, things like that, they only come about because I made that decision to be a member of Parliament. So it's been vindicated in that respect. But it's, look, I make no bones about it. It hasn't been a roaring success. I think we've had We've had windows of light, but the trouble is,
what are you referring to?
In terms of improving veterans' care in this country,
Okay.
and resetting this nation's relationship with her military, which is what I came into this to do. We've had chunks of light. I did an inquiry into the Iraq Historical Allegations team and managed to shut that down. A £60 million project. You get told by the Ministry of Defence, "Oh, we're never going to shut this," blah blah, and then you can't do that.
Why did it get brought about? I don't.
So it got brought about because we've got ourselves in a real muddle when it comes to legislation and operations. So essentially, European human rights law applies in operation. So a combatant or a non-combatant can allege a crime. As a civilian in Iraq or Afghanistan, it has to be investigated by law. There has to be an outcome from that, and it has to go through the courts. And now, clearly, if that and warfare are not compatible, it's very hard to distinguish who's a combatant and who's not. It's very hard to prove that things did or didn't happen. But the problem the government made and the MOD made was that it started paying out compensation to make this stuff go away, right? So Mrs. Miggins from Nadi Ali would come in and say, "You tore my washing line down," and they'll go, "Okay, $50." That starts it. Then someone comes in and says, "You killed my cow." Okay, $100. And someone comes in and says, "You killed my son," and they're like, "Right, okay." And clearly there are occasions when that happens, right? And we take it mega. So what it's like. We take it mega seriously, and we do everything we can to avoid it. And where things go wrong, we make them right. However, sorry. Excuse me.
Bless you.
However, if you start paying out for claims without even speaking to the blokes who were there first, and you will then build this industry, right, that people like Phil Shiner will look at and think, actually, there's a cut in that for me. If I can go out to Afghan or Iraq and I can get an industrial loads of these claims and I get 5, 10, 15% of each of them, I'm going to make millions of pounds. So that's what they did. And instead of the government thinking, right, it's something funny here, either 3,500 of our troops in Iraq committed war crimes, or there's something not quite right, they for some reason entertained the idea that there was a mass breakdown of discipline and law and order in the military in Iraq in 2005. And for those of us who've actually served, I mean, clearly you will always have your bad apples and things go wrong. I actually think there is a very resilient system of justice within the military. No one actually wants to be associated with guys who break the law in that manner. And actually, the military does self-regulate pretty well. You will have instances where it goes wrong. Baha Musa was an incident that went wrong. But by and large, you can't spend millions of pounds training corporals, sergeants, officers, commanding officers in integrity and the core values and so on, and then completely side with the enemy when they make an allegation against them. It makes no sense. And we got ourselves into a real pickle, and people who were being affected by it was appalling, because the MOD essentially sort of contracted the investigations out to a company called Red Snapper. Loads of ex or coppers just going around, and they would knock on doors. They wouldn't come knocking on my door. They'd go to privates and lance corporals who maybe struggled to deal with their experiences from Iraq and Afghanistan. Couldn't remember quite what was going on. Try and build a case. I mean, it was literally bullying, sort of picking on individuals they thought they were going to get somewhere with. And it was shocking dereliction by the government. You ain't got to speak to people like Brian Wood. Have you seen him?
No, I've had some
speak to people like him.
I've had some dealings with him on social media, but I
and speak to him about his experience. I mean, it's completely unacceptable.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's very it's very easy for us to see how ridiculous that amount of claims would be. 2,500, you say, over 5 years, when we've been part of the organisation. And granted, you and I have two separate parts, two separate sort of parts of it. You're an officer, very much the commander, strategist, if you like, I was a senior NCO, but we from a following the rules perspective, I witnessed all the way through my career from a private up to when I was a commander, as I'm sure you did. The emphasis placed on do not break the rules.
Yeah.
Do not break the rules of engagement. And if you step outside those lines, you'll get hammered.
Yeah.
Hammered. And people did. And
like
you said, there are isolated pockets. You get isolated pockets. I was very lucky not to be around those people. I know of I've heard of isolated incidents where there was, people did stuff they shouldn't have done. I'm talking little things like flipping, cause some damage they shouldn't have done. And aside from that, none.
Well, I used to kind of like take it personally in a way. So as a commander, if you see something happen that shouldn't have happened, I used to ask myself what sort of environment I was creating where the blokes thought that this was an acceptable way to behave. So clearly I would deal with it with the individual concerned, but I'd also ask myself those questions as to what sort of environment was I creating where individuals felt that this was an appropriate way to behave. And actually, the Marine A issue has been very divisive in the military community, very kind of polarizing. But I'm still yet to find a serving individual in one of the units I served with who thinks he did the right thing and thinks he shouldn't be punished. And that's the reality of it. You will have lots of old and bold who say you should have done this and should have done that, and back in my day and so on. The reality is we are judged on our professionalism, and by his own admission, if you let those standards slip, you do take punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of people lost their heads over that. And certainly as a public figure, it was quite interesting watching.
It was. I think it was a combination. I agree with you. He broke the law. It shouldn't have happened, right? But at the same time, I think he was maybe scapegoated slightly.
I agree with that as well. And there's a way of there's a way of dealing with these things. There's a way of treating these individuals. There's a way of you've got to ask yourself what were the series of events that led him to do that. And I think they've had the investigation and so on. But in terms of rotating troops in and out, I mean, I remember in 2010 when one of my soldiers was killed, and I was I saw the commanding officer, and I was relaying to him what it was like at my patrol base. And I think we've been in continuous combat twice a day for 42 days, and at that stage, and it was then to go. And this was the beginning of the summer, so it was going to go on and on. And he couldn't kind of believe it. He was like, "Well, this is ridiculous." Even in the Second World War, they would do 3 weeks, 4 weeks at the front and get rotated around. And now we've got some seriously combat hardened individuals. And I think we just, we've got to keep sight on what it is. I mean, there's two sides to the coin. I don't think we should do 6-month tours. I think we should do longer than that. But if you are going to get individuals who
longer,
I do.
Really?
Yeah, I do, because I feel that if you are to really understand a counterinsurgency challenge, or you're, for example, working in counterterrorism, or you're going up against the networks in that country, the Americans do year-long tours. And they look at us and they think we haven't got it right. And in that case, I agree with them. When it comes down to combat, it's a different matter. So if you have guys like who man the lines, like we did, going through 6-7 months of continuous combat, then that's a different issue.
Oh, okay.
But I think certainly at the commander level, certainly in these mentoring roles, where it's all about building up those relationships with the Kandak commander, with the interpreters and so on, I think, yes, we should be looking at a longer time away.
I agree. I can see why you say longer from that perspective. I agree with you, but to feel those benefits of that, for that to work, the fighting troops, because the fighting troops need to be there for that length of time as well. Now, mental health aside, right? Impacts of war aside. Okay,
yeah, but that's got to be managed. So during the war.
Yeah.
During the war, okay, they would do 30 days at the front and then go and regenerate, force regenerate, and so on. During the Second World War, and that's the way to manage it. And they only got there because they realised if they did more than that, then their operational effectiveness would fall off and their professionalism would reduce and things like that. So they came in about the system where they would do 30 days on the front and come back. It's very similar in Vietnam. And we didn't adopt that in Afghanistan. And I think that has led to a few problems for some of certainly our most combat fatigued individuals.
But can just 30 days, would that reduce the personal, professional, and emotional investment in a battle or in a campaign for the individual? And then they're not. If I was 30 days and you're getting out 30 days, I would be maybe.
Yeah, but you wouldn't do the tour 30 days and go home. You do your 30 days and you rotate, and you then go to Bastion and do your training cycle for a bit. Okay. Or you would go and go to a different area where it's not so busy. I think you've got to be professional and rotate your people in and out, so that people can you can manage their experiences. And I think certainly that a factor in Sergeant Blackman was that issue.
How far into the tour was it?
So I think his incident was sort of 4 months in, and in that, I was actually in that PB the year before him, and it was.
Where was it?
So it was up in Nadi Ali, near it's in Nadi Ali North. In a place called it was called Kamar, PB Kamar.
I was there in 2011.
Yeah. So if you go from Kamar over to Route Nike, and then you've got the jungle in the middle, 31 West, where they all got pushed up from Marja by the Americans. So basically that place is riddled with the Taliban.
So Kamar was where that incident happened, or that area?
It was that area. There's a couple of smaller PBs along Route Nike. It was one of those. I can't remember the name. CP Quadrat is up the top. That's right. And then down on Route Nike on the right hand side of that AO, on the eastern side, there's
Ghazni.
Ghazni.
Ghazni was down there, wasn't it? Exactly. Yeah, Ghazni was a hive. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it happened. And look, you could never. We weren't there. I think a lot of us have been in that position and not chosen that course of action, but. Shit happens, and we have to maintain standards, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. Why? I asked this question constantly. Regarding the mental health side of things. Why are we? When I say we, I'm referring to UK, US, Canada. I can't speak for Australia or Cuba. Why are we not learning the lessons from previous wars and applying them going forward? I'm talking about dealing with the mental health issue. I'm talking about learning tactical and strategic decisions, things like rotating people in and out more frequently. Talking about why aren't we carrying it forward? What is stopping us doing it? We've got all the historical documentation there. We've got all the records. What is going wrong from a military perspective? What's going pear-shaped?
I think when it comes to looking after people, I think people are very quick to forget. So if you look at, I never served in Iraq, right? But if you look at what we would, you had the initial punch into Iraq, and there were weeks when Iraq was busy. But if you look at the sheer levels of combat, okay, Afghanistan was a different matter. The British Army had not seen that really over a sustained period since Korea, and that wasn't my view. That was the view of David Richards, Chief of Defence Staff at the time. So we had not experienced that level of. You think about what combat is. It is testing all of your processes, all your equipment, all your training. It's a persistent test and a spotlight. And we made massive strides in that time, but we were quite a long way behind the curve. Why were we? Because we had Northern Ireland, which was extremely dangerous and very, very difficult, but a very different war. And I think a lot of the time you lose that sort of corporate knowledge within an organization. I think when it comes to winning the counterinsurgency, I think, I write a little bit about it's my book. Not everyone agrees with me, but I did become. If you're a joint fires guy like me, you serve with lots of different units, right?
Explain that.
So joint fires is you get into contact with sections or platoon or company or whatever it is, or patrol. And your job is to decisively end that engagement so that you can withdraw or win the battle. And so,
decisively,
you have a couple of radios on your back, and you can talk to air, aviation, artillery, mortars, missiles, and so on. And you have to think about a weapon to target match. So you're not going to destroy the whole village when you've only got a sniper, but at the same time it needs to be accurate, and you need to, the most number of casualties come in an ambush in the first 9 seconds, don't they? Because nobody's expecting it. So you've got to be able to re-seize the initiative, particularly if there's only 6 or 7 of you and you're kind of surrounded. So that's your role as a joint fire. So you spend a lot of time on the radio while sort of maintaining your situational awareness. You'll often have a skilled soldier with you as well, who is trained in either air, aviation, or one of these things. But as the commander, you're trained in all of them, and your sort of names on the bottom. So, you have to have 22 of them at any one time in a conflict like Afghan, because they are your insurance policy. If a base gets overrun, the only way you're gonna defend yourself is through joint fires. So, it's a good job. But if you do that job, you will serve with a number of different units, people, commanders in Afghan. And I did get the feeling, certainly after your tour 2006-7, and then I was out in 8-9, and then 10 again, I felt people were getting to a dangerous mindset about Afghanistan, where they wanted to do Afghanistan to get it on their report, to command troops at war, to potentially get some sort of write-up because it was good for their career. And so all I noticed was that commanders would come in, and a lot of them would behave at the major colonel level like the whole war had been waiting for them to arrive. And they had their strategy, and they were going to win the war in their 7 months. And I'm afraid that went up to the brigade commanders at times. But all of them had a lot of them had a very different outlook as to how to achieve success in Afghanistan. And that's why I think we should sometimes do longer tours, and get that perspective. If you think about the difference between doing a winter and a summer tour in Afghan, is huge. And different techniques will work at different times. I mean, as well as I do, as soon as the poppy harvest finishes, I mean, literally that night, you're into the fighting season for a good 4 or 5 months until it starts getting chilly. That is a completely different experience from going out and doing deliberate operations over the course of the winter. One of the reasons, Kamar and 31 West and that area and Quadrat is so contested is because the operation into Marja went in over the winter of 2009-10. And then that summer, when I was there, was the first summer where all these guys had been hemmed into 31 West. And of course it was going to go mad. But that, that wasn't sort of handled correctly in my view. And I think there was an element of commanders wanting to do Afghan, and for technicians or professional soldiers like you and me, who we don't command hordes of people, but we end up doing the majority of the fighting. It can become a little bit nauseating.
Mm-hmm. How do you win a counterinsurgency?
Oh, that's $1 million question. I think people have written some very good books on it, how to eat soup with a knife and so on.
I'm going to rephrase that. Can you
eat soup with a knife?
Can you? No.
It takes a long time.
Can you win?
We've got some very successful counterinsurgency operations.
Could Afghan have been one?
Afghan's a different issue. I mean, Afghan as a country is
define win. Define win. What's
winning? Well, this is what I mean. I mean, so you've got to redefine what success looks like, what a win means in Afghanistan. But a lot of this is down to A lot of this is down to the political management of expectations, right? So if actually politicians had not said things like, we'll go in without a shot being fired, and then seen all these casualties coming back, if they'd have said, look, this is a really difficult counterinsurgency campaign. However, 9/11, the actual plot behind 9/11 came out of Afghanistan. We have to go there and try and deny these guys a nation state to operate within. Then, a lot of it comes down to honesty, a political misunderstanding of the military and the use of military force, and an inability of politicians to bring the country with them. I mean, it's easy to forget now. 1 million people marched in London against the Iraq War on the 11th of March 2003. 1 million people, and we still went to war.
Was that the was that the true intent of the Afghan campaign? Do you think that was to go and deny a foothold for the Taliban to get,
Yeah, I think well, what sort of thinking about it, the 9/11 was hatched in Afghanistan because the Taliban government decided to let Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden operate within Afghanistan and wouldn't hand them over. So they then had the real estate and the country and the resources to plan a huge strategic terrorist atrocity, as in 9/11. We then went out on Opchikano in 2001 out to Afghanistan, but arguably the drumbeat was rolling for Iraq, which was incredibly unpopular and in hindsight, not the right thing to do. Iraq becomes this massive vacuum that sucks up all the resources and the people. The eye gets taken off Afghanistan, and then when you go back to finish a job in Afghanistan, it's got 10 times worse, and you're starting, back from where you should never be.
I've come to believe, rightly or wrongly, and feel free to try and correct me if you think otherwise, which I suspect you do, is that Afghan, the real behind the curtains motivation, one of the motivations for going there was not what was portrayed in the media, and they were saying there to try and get the foothold, and they overplayed that threat, I think.
So was what?
So I've come to believe that
mm-hmm.
the reason we were told that we were going to Afghanistan, one of the reasons, there were a load of different reasons, and it sort of changed over the course of the campaign as well. The reasons were in there. What you're saying there about going in and denying the Taliban a foothold, and yes, absolutely, the idea that 9/11 was hatched there and planned. Then it's
but what did it become? Yeah.
I couldn't believe that one of the reasons we're in there is because geographically and politically at the time and over the course of the campaign and even now, but although less significant now, Afghan country where it is and at that political side of things, it was part of a power struggle in that area, or not a struggle, or a power struggle area. Russia, China, the West. And that's part of it, established there. And I think very similar.
You're right, but I think it's kind of 20 years out of date, because I think that's what the Russians were doing in Afghanistan. They did not want.
Absolutely.
The Americans did not want.
You don't think it was a rerun?
I don't think it was, because
especially with the state of China at the time.
I know, but I just I'd love to think that much thought went into it, but I don't think it did. I think. Look, I'm of the view that going to Afghanistan was not the wrong thing to do. I think it was the right thing to do. I think that there is certainly when I was working at the strategic level doing counterterrorism, there is a very clear link between operations being planned in Afghanistan and safety in the UK. And that was very, very clear to me. We lost our way because I think too many people had their own agendas as to how they were going to solve the war. I mean, if you look at drugs, we for a while we did nothing about drugs at all, and then some commanders would decide to do something about the drugs, and the violence would increase. And there just seems to be. I mean, if you remember, one of our huge achievements was getting this bloody turbine up to. Still not been installed. I mean.
It's there though, Johnny. It's there.
It's there. Mission with the company. What a success! It was rotting in the desert.
Thinking about what you're saying about serving longer on these operations, one of the things I've heard before is that, and this actually would tie into what you're saying, is the suggestion that the terms of service, like the Prime Minister's 4 years, right?
Yeah, 5.
5. Sorry, 5. That is too short. It should be longer.
As in, what do you mean? So your postings to regiments,
it should be longer.
2 to 3 years should be 5 to 6 years.
I'm talking about the PM.
The Prime Minister should be longer.
Yeah.
Look, there's definitely an argument for that. I think and I agree with you. I think these short terms don't allow any sort of strategic, difficult decisions to be made, and any sort of plan or agenda or vision be sort of promulgated to the British people for them to believe and get behind them and actually see some social change and advancement in the country. I do agree with that. The converse side of that is that you get a terrible Prime Minister, you're not going to get rid of him. But
How much? A question for you on that. How much, realistically, how much control does the PM have? And the reason I'm asking is, and it's not just like, I'm not just talking the UK government, talk about US, talk about anywhere with like a democratic society and a parliament or a senate or whatever it may be. Is it not, if the PM changes over and even if the party changes, is it not pretty much the same structure underneath, the same? Look, if you change your CO in a unit, right? If you change your CO in a unit,
it's nothing like
go
that.
on,
The
explain
Prime
it to me.
Minister is the chief executor.
My politics, I'm not knowledgeable.
Of all sort of government policy, party policy, what goes on. If you were to see, for example, forget their Labour and Conservative, if you were to see an individual like Jeremy Corbyn in number 10 Downing Street, this country would fundamentally change. Now, some people want that to happen.
They literally have that much power.
They have that much power to fundamentally change the state, whether in terms of taxation, whether in terms of the welfare state, security, foreign policy. All these decisions come down to the government of the day. Whether it's even a tactical decision as to whether or not we're going to decide to try and do a hostage rescue in whatever country it might be, to what the corporation tax level is going to be, and corporation tax, goes up and down. Actually, if you reduce it, you get more businesses coming in, and you get a greater tax coming into the country. Some people morally have a problem with that, and they think actually our corporations should be taxed to the rafters. The problem is that they all go to different countries, but there is two different political ideologies that will fundamentally change this country. So the Prime Minister's got a huge amount of authority, a huge amount of influence, and basically runs the show, as they should. That is, we're a democracy and we're a proud democracy.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping they didn't.
That's kind of opening. No, I'm afraid not. I remember when I first went to Westminster, I kept thinking I'd go into a room at some point, I'd open a door and see a whole line of desks and people, and some people who knew what they were doing, but unfortunately it doesn't exist. It's just a group of guys like me or not like me trying to do their best for the country.
What's your day-to-day like? What's it like working with civvies? No,
it's fine.
None less civvies.
The thing is about the military and resettlement, right, is that where people get it wrong is that they forget that actually the military is a really privileged, sanitized environment. Okay, you're with young people who want to be there generally on the whole, who are fit, motivated, look after themselves. The real world is not like that at all. The real world is full of lots of different people with lots of different challenges. And actually, it is the real world, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's no point coming out and saying, oh, I can't, there's civvies this and civvies that. That is the real world, right? And you've got to make it work. You've got to there's no point hanging up your uniform and pressing it every weekend in your locker, harking back to the army. The civilian life is the real world, and you've got to get on with it, and you've got to adapt. And I think we can and should and must and will always do more for those who leave the services, but I can't help but feel some don't help themselves as much as I would like them to. We've got some amazingly gifted people in the military who I've had the privilege to work with over the last 14, 15 years. But when it comes to resettlement, I think it's as much about mindset as anything else. Look, leaving and getting turned down for your first few jobs is going to be pretty disconcerting for any military guy. In civilian street, that is normal. You'll apply for a number of jobs before you get one. Mm-hmm. In the military, things are often taken care of, tax returns and so on. And you just got to get on with it in civilian life because this is the real world. It's the way, So people have this perception that the military is how everything should be, and it's not actually the case. The military is there to fight and win on operations. That's it. And yes, there will be parts of that that are fantastic: core values, standards, teamwork, selflessness, the Commando qualities, and so on. But it's not the real world, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately, yeah, right. That adapting. The military's it's elitism, and rightly so. That's the
whole idea.
You have to. And it took me a while to realise it and learn it.
It takes everybody a while. And I think the faster people get away from this mindset that, kind of civvies are useless and everything in the military is perfect. I mean, it's something, there's some amazingly gifted people who never go near the military, who you will meet in your day-to-day life. And I've never had the view that just simply because you've served, or simply because you've done stuff on operation. I mean, you look at it operationally, I always struggled with the sort of honours and awards system, because actually I've seen some people do some amazing things and never had any recognition for it, or they just frankly got on with it and not talked about it. I've also seen some people win honours and awards for the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of. So it's all about individuals, I think, and an individual's sort of qualities and characters, and as to how you make it outside the military.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's doable, and definitely everyone needs a bit of a helping hand, a bit of luck, absolutely. And the systems there should be there to help those who don't get that.
It's the distribution of knowledge as well. Again, one of the reasons I started this, and one of the reasons Michael, started a Declassified podcast, it's that distribution of knowledge. You get out, you immediately, and this can be said for any organisation that you be part of for any amount of years, whether you're military or not. You leave it, and you're all of a sudden disconnected from it. If you're trying to move it to something else and you don't know it, how are you supposed to get the information? How do you know? You can't draw on your own experience. So it's going back to, that's part of the mental health issue, distribution of information. I didn't, there's over the last year and a half, over the last year, I've been, I've spoken about it for a while. I want myself in health heroes. I have my own problems going on. And that was off the back of 3 or 4 months of badgering by one of my closest friends. Get there, go there, get there, go there. That was off one of them. And in the end, I just got to a very, 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 very bad place. And went in. It wasn't just, it's a lot more fucking difficult than that. But as soon as I entered that not healthy heroes, but that as soon as I got into that sort of cycle, I was there. I made the first step. As soon as in that world of this, all of a sudden, this support that I could see, or that was available to me. It was like day and night, Johnny. It was like day and night. It was like day and night. I had a million problems, right? A million problems. 999,999 of those were in my head, but there was so many things that could help me straight away. I thought it was just a relief, and I thought straight away, and I've thought this a few times over different things, professional career as well. I wish I had known this before. I wish someone had told me. It was different with the mental health. My mate had been telling me, and I know it from other places, but your mental is different, you don't accept it. I heard it before. It's like when I went into CP in the Middle East. I stepped on the ground in Iraq, and I went, I had loads of mates that were doing that on the project I was on, and I knew very little, and I stepped there, and I went, the right kit, I buy too much of all sorts. There was all sorts of information I didn't know, and I literally on the ground thought, why? I wish I'd known this before I'd stepped on the plane, before I got out. I wish I'd known this. Why didn't you tell me? It's that distribution of information. How did you get it out there? And it's through things like having people in the right place, like Michael doing his thing. You got there's an organization on Facebook of all places, right? I say of all places, quite common. There's a Facebook group on there. I don't know if you know of it. It's called the Warriors Ops. Warriors RV. It's called, right? It's called that. And it sounds a bit, when I saw it, sounds a bit cheesy, but it's got like 12,000 ex-military on there, and it is literally a century point. No, it's not true. That's what it is. Drama. We got a drama in Plymouth. We got a drama here. This, that, and the other. It goes on there, and mate, you've got masses of people on the ground going around. I can help. I can give you this. I can get that. I can get this. That distribution of information. It was formed for the mental health side of things, but it helps with all sorts, from jobs to.
So there's a few of those networks at the moment, and they are seriously helpful. One of the things I've, when I came into this and I wanted to really take on veterans care, there is some really good care around. The trouble is accessing it. The trouble is the points of access, understanding it's there, but also regulating it too. Say again?
Being accepting
of it is a big part. I think we're getting slightly better at that. But one of the key challenges as well is around regulating it in a way and making sure that actually people are adhering to sort of really basic standards in there. So, for example, practicing evidence-based care or having a common needs assessment, so that actually if you go from Help for Heroes to combat stress, you're not going to have to tell your story again. There was a common needs assessment for veterans going into the veterans care stream, if you like.
Standardizing it
From
the start.
Yeah, and having a common entrance point, stuff like that. I mean, I've tried to do that for 2 or 3 years now. I've abjectly failed because we've run into Brexit and nobody's got any time for it in Westminster. But, you know, we will get out the other side of Brexit and we will reform veterans care in this country along those lines.
It's going the right way, I think.
It's getting there. I mean, there are some good practices now. You know, you've got Veterans Gateway and so on, but it's about bringing it all together. There is, you know, there are pockets of exceptional care. And the key is to get that best practice across the system so everyone works as a team and actually refocuses around the individual who is trying to access this care. Now, if I had problems now, I would struggle to know where to go for veterans care. If a private 2-3 years out of the army working in a call centre in Cardiff hits problems now, how on earth is he going to know where to go if I can't figure it out as a member of parliament? So, you know, we have a long way to go. Progress is too slow, but at least we've seen some.
My experience of it was when I was in that, under that umbrella, I was in the chain, if you like, from going and saying, "Give me some help, please," and not knowing what the help was that I needed. Just look, fucking, this is me. I need squaring away.
Yeah.
Hold my hand.
Yeah.
Where
did you get Help for Heroes? You said, yeah.
Shabazz House, Collie, yeah. My mate had a very good experience there. He'd been in there for a while. Injury. But then when I was in, I became involved with several organisations, not just Help for Heroes, British Legion, NHS, Walking with the Wounded, and a civi therapist.
Yeah.
It was very, very disjointed. I didn't.
See,
there was no primary.
So this is the problem. I want to find out. Is your internet working, by the way?
Yeah. 2 seconds. What do you have to?
I want to. This guy's name.
Don't go looking through my photos.
I'm not going to look through your photos.
Just Google.
I haven't got a fetish for really ugly ginger people. Don't worry about it.
I'll let that one slide. Because you're an MP. What are you looking for? Because
I'm looking for Dan's surname because I don't want to forget his name.
You're better dressed than I expected. I was expecting beige trousers, maroon leather shoes. You know, typical.
But you're
crap.
You know, the sort of officer you had to put up with in the parachute regiment is very different to Commando Joint Fires officer, I'm afraid.
Where were you based when you left? What geographically?
Plymouth. So Plymouth's been my home. I mean, that's
where
I'm the MP for. Yeah. Well, as soon as I got elected, but I live just outside Plymouth now. Yeah. People are pretty silly about politics. I didn't want my kids going to a school.
Oh, really?
Where parents will harass them on the gates.
You're joking?
No, honestly,
what?
I can't tell you the amount of vitriol you get in this job. I'm very lucky because I generally, Dan Collins, that's right. Lance Sergeant Dan Collins. You've got to read about his story, mate.
He wrote the book. He wrote the book, didn't he?
He didn't write a book, mate.
Yeah, he did he?
No, he didn't.
Before he died, he did. He flipping did. Sure
did
he did. Yeah, I'm sure he did.
Dan Collins.
He was a sniper.
Yeah, he was in a book. I don't know if he wrote one.
I am pretty sure.
If he did read one, send me a link to it later. I'd like to read it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
But, I mean, watch his video that he sends to his mum and think, what does it take for an individual to get there? And I tell you what, your reserve will be topped up to continue this fight.
I'm here today, right? I know how it feels to be at the depths. I didn't walk myself into Help the Heroes because I was feeling great. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was a product of, for the third time over a period of months, that an option of a way out popped into my head that should not be popping into my head.
Yeah.
And I'm a
What were you
logical.
struggling, PTSD or?
I'm undiagnosed. I don't know.
Yeah,
It was a mental health issue.
Yeah.
You know.
What did you do? CBT or anything like that? Cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yes.
What sort of treatment did you do?
It was with a therapist.
Are you on meds?
Sessions.
Things
No,
like
no. I'm a big believer in lifestyle changes as well as it was. It's a holistic thing, isn't it? Mental health, you got to.
So you did a course of CBT, did you, with help from here?
Yeah. Yeah, walk with the wounded through that.
Okay,
but
great.
I didn't go. You know, I didn't end up in there because I felt great, and that's you get into a rut, and it can be exacerbated by alcohol abuse. It can be exacerbated by poor lifestyle, other stresses going on. You know, I went through a divorce a few years back, and I think for the strongest, most positively minded, who may be a little bit ignorant to, you know, it's not bad. It's just like, you know, I was mentally one of the strongest people you ever meet. That position I was in, were useless.
Mental health has got absolutely zero to do with that. You know, this idea that you can tough it out. Right?
I agree. Yeah. And I made that mistake for years.
It's absolute horseshit. If you actually look into the, you know, if you apply your brain to this stuff rather than your kind of preceptions, things around mental health and being unable to forget images, being unable to forget thoughts, intrusive thoughts, obsessive behavior, these are chemical things in your brain, right? That you can reprogram through things like cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, take medication for to alter the balances of certain chemicals in your brain. It is exactly like physical health. It's like having a broken leg or busting your ankle. And the sooner people understand this, and if they are poorly, get help, the better they will get. And the trouble is people leave it so late, right? So your chances of getting better with mental health, if you intervene early, upstream, before you get the concomitant things like alcohol abuse, substance abuse, debt, whatever it may be, if you get in there early and you get help early, you can fundamentally improve 9 times over your chances of success. The problem is people think, oh, I'll just snap out of it. I'll just toughen up, you know, and we are getting better, right? Since 2006-7, I mean, Trim came in, do you remember that, in 2008? Yeah. I mean, and it was total tokenism. I mean, like 2009-10, you know, I remember a horrific incident. This poor guy drowned in the canal, Neb Canal. You know, he went in a vehicle, and we were carrying him onto the helicopter, and he was so heavy, the stretcher snapped, right? So I grabbed him like a baby, like that, and I put him on. Anyway, came back, and
he's dead.
He's dead, yeah. Came back and sat down with the lads, and the Trim practitioner was a sergeant in the platoon. And he said, I told him what happened. I was like, guys, that was horrible. Like, literally, this guy's stretcher collapsed, and I just basically cuddled him and chucked him in the back. And he was like, well, I'm the Trim practitioner. How do you feel about it? And I was like, yeah, pretty shit. And he goes, okay, you've been trimmed. And that was, you know, and we laugh about it, right? But
Trim was a mental health thing, wasn't it? It was a
trauma risk management.
That's
which has actually done some wonderful things for people.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I don't think we took it seriously fast enough. But look, I think that there is always the chance, or there's a fear around the bow wave of mental health coming out of Afghanistan and the concomitant problems with that. I think we can beat it, but the government clearly needs to do more. I think veterans community as a whole, needs to regulate itself in a way. One of the problems we've got, is people self-diagnosing. And what that means is that friends of mine who are genuinely poorly do not want to diagnose as a PTSD because they think they're joining some bluffers club, which couldn't be further from the truth. You know, and we have to regulate that, because no one's going to come in from the outside who hasn't been on operations and say, look, mate, I know you feel like your whole world's going wrong and so on. You may have any number of mental health problems, but it's not PTSD. So let's not treat it as PTSD, because you're not going to get better. Let's treat perhaps your depression or your substance abuse, and then you will feel like you haven't got PTSD. So it's that kind of enlightened, more intelligent approach to mental health that can have real real exponential effects on the community. And we can do that ourselves by, not, I get the impression sometimes anyone who's had PTSD does not want PTSD, right? It is a horrific, life-limiting, absolutely poleaxing condition that nobody wants. But I have seen some people who want it. Okay, we have to regulate that because no one else is going to. In reality, yes, you will get psychiatrists and someone who'll sit down and say something, you haven't got PTSD, but ultimately they're better off hearing it from another combat veteran who goes, look, mate, I've done that stuff with you as well. These thoughts you're getting, it's totally normal. To get some of these thoughts is normal. Yes, you can't sleep, you're waking up at night or whatever. That's a different matter. But actually, to have some effect from a traumatic experience is normal. But hey, if we tackle your alcoholism and we tackle your money management, you're going to, you'll find you don't have PTSD and you can get on with your life.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a really good point. It's that it doesn't. There's a stigma attached to PTSD, and I know exactly what you're saying about people who want it, but the psychological impact of war, okay, is a plethora of things, not just PTSD. It's like I've got we're gonna have to wrap this up. Like I've got a friend who is having mental health issues, but it's straight away it's being looked at. Well, it must be PTSD, and I think he thinks in his head, hey, it might be. My gut feeling is it's not, and I'm no expert, but it's more there are issues going on. It's more of an attention thing. I don't mean this in a bad way. It's he's got mental health issues. Does it mean he should be paying any less attention? No, he's got issues. But again, that awareness of mental health. What does Michael Coates call it? Mental fitness. Brilliant term. Mental fitness.
Well, I actually believe in something called, and you speak to people like Mark Ormrod from my generation and so on, I actually believe in something called post-traumatic growth, where you can have these things. Right?
Michael mentioned that as well. Yeah. I've not heard that before.
That's certainly what happened to me. I mean, I had a pretty rough time growing up. I had obsessive compulsive disorder as an adolescent, which absolutely laid me low. Afghan straightened me out.
Yeah.
And I feel very strongly about this stuff, which is why I feel this rush to get a diagnosis of PTSD. I think we just need to be very, very careful about it. Not because the reason some people think I want them to be careful is that I'm playing it down or anything. PTSD is a horrific condition. However, if you try and treat something as PTSD and it's not PTSD, you will never get better. And those who genuinely need that help will not be able to access it because they've been swamped. So let's be grown up about this. Let's have a mature, honest discussion. And we must do much better around other mental health conditions, depression, OCD, and all sorts of other conditions. We must do better so that people know they can access treatment for that. I know some people who say they've got PTSD because they feel they can access the treatments. The answer isn't to do down PTSD, it's to actually bring these other treatments up so people can, this parity of esteem that the government talks about is a reality, whether you've got a physical injury or mental injury. Okay, your treatment is exactly the same. Your chances of getting better are exactly the same. We are on a journey to that, but it's too slow at the moment, and I'll do everything we can to get us going faster.
Good, appreciate it. Sound like that to do it. Well, right. Is there anything you want to mention? Anything at all before we wrap it up? Nothing at all. Where are you going to be in 2 years' time?
hopefully not in prison.
Well, I hope wherever you go, it's
a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, John. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. Good stuff.
We are.